Okay, yeah, so let's talk about the three types of structs in Rust. There are three types. You have the unit-like struct, which you can call the unit struct. You have the tuple struct, and then you have the regular structs. Like in the previous video that you can check out right here, we've talked at length about the regular struct. Okay, so let's start by talking about the tuple struct. Okay, as I mentioned in the previous video, struct are just types, just like tuples, and they're quite similar to tuples in many ways, but they are quite specific. Okay, for example, let's say we have a color where we store a color code, okay, and we set it to a tuple. And you know that color codes are usually if they have the RGB encoding, they will have RGB, and each of those values will have an 8-bit length, right? So usually it will be the minimum will be 0 and the maximum will be 255, starting from 0. That will make it 256. Because of that, we can use U8 as the data type. You know, when you work in Rust, you usually have to think about the length of your data in order to know the data type you are going to use, because that will also determine the memory Rust is going to allocate for your code. So here we can use U8 because U8 means unsigned integer of 8-bit long. Unsigned, which is it's not going to have negatives. Colors don't have negatives, so they have from 0 to 255 when you count in decimal. Okay, so that is why you are using U8 for the R and U8 for the G, and then U8 for the B, which is blue. Okay, now we have our color, defining it using the tuple. Then we can then set the value. Let's say we want it to be black. We set it to 0, 0, 0. So the first value will be 0, the second value will be 0, and the third value will be 0. And we are good. The problem with using tuple is that it doesn't have a name. Okay. And for example, let's say we have a function that, let's say, display color. It accepts a color argument, so we define a color parameter, and then say it will accept this color. But now we are using tuple, so we define a tuple for it. Okay, and we say this is what it accepts. That is what we need to display the color. Okay, it's all good and it works, but the problem still is that it doesn't have a type. It's just tuple, just a group, a way to group three values. Okay, and this is where, when you want to be specific and give a tuple a type, you start talking about the tuple struct. Okay, it's just a struct. You start by defining it by using the struct keyword, and then you type in the name of that struct. Okay, and since you're talking about color, we just call it color, and then we can make it a struct. Okay, it's like defining a struct like this. If you remove these two, it's like defining a struct of U8, U8, and then U8. Okay, but you now make it a struct by using the struct keyword and then giving it a name, color. Remember, you have to use camel case for naming structs. So now this tuple is a lot like this struct. Okay, it's locked like this struct, but it now has a name. That is why it's called a tuple struct. Okay, they are quite similar, and in this case, we can, in this function, we can now be more specific by saying we don't just want a tuple. Okay, we want a color. So whoever is going to call this function will pass a type of color to it, and then we can pass this value. We are now a lot more specific, and then if you call this function, you will now be passing a real color, type of color to it. Okay, now watch what will happen. Since this color struct has this data type this way, watch what will happen if we try to use this struct that we have. Okay, let's say we call this and then we try to pass this. It's not going to allow it because it will say it's not of type. Okay, it's not that type. You must pass a color to it. So you can just do it this way. Yeah, you pass 0, 0, and 0. Okay, so the difference is that whenever you use it, you have to pass the name of that struct. so this is tuple struct. It looks a lot like tuple, but it's a struct because it has a name specifically. That is the major difference. Now let's talk about the unit struct. So the unit struct is like an empty tuple. You know that unit in Rust is an empty tuple. Okay, if you create a variable and then you say it's of type an empty unit, okay, like we just did, then this is now a unit because it is of type empty tuple. So you can even use it as a type and also as a value, because that is specific what we're doing here. Okay, it doesn't have anything. It takes up 0 bytes in memory. The same thing with an empty as a unit struct or a unit like struct. You still define it as a struct, but when you define it, it's not going to have a body, it's not going to have any field, nothing. It is just a unit struct. You don't have to provide anything for it, just this way. Okay, now you might be wondering, why do we need to do this? It's usually used when you need just a type, or maybe when you have a thread and you just need a type that implements that interface, that thread. Then you can use a unit struct like this. You can create a variable, let's say empty, and then you say it's type empty, and then you can just assign empty to it. Okay, it's just a type. Or maybe you are building something and then along the line you know that you're going to need a type of empty later on, but you don't know the implementations yet. You can still create it, leave it as a unit struct, and then start using it, and later you can then upgrade your code. Okay, now the third one is the regular struct, which we've already looked at. Okay, you still define it by using struct, the struct keyword, and then you provide the name. So this might be a product. Okay, and then inside here the product, you have a name called string. You separate it by a comma, and then you also have a name of type string. Okay, you also separate that by a comma. So whoever called this function, whoever creates an instance of this product struct, we have to provide these values. Okay, for example, if we have product 1, you can say it's type product, it's of type product, and then we assign it to a new product. So we are still going to talk about the ways you can instantiate a struct instance in Rust. This is one of the ways, okay, by doing it directly. It's actually called the struct literal syntax, okay, where you can just type in the name of the struct, provide some ID, okay, in a curly braces, and then provide the name. Let's say t-shirt. Okay, but these are string slides, so you have to convert them to string. So now you have a product with a string ID and then a string name. Okay, so this is one way to instantiate a struct. Okay, you can also, there are many ways you can use like a factory to create it using a function. Okay, so now we have a function that returns a product. But if you hover over this product, it will say mismatch type expected struct product found an empty tuple, and that is because we made this an expression statement by passing a semicolon at the end. Once you remove that semicolon, that one will go. Remember, in Rust, at the end, if the statement you use or the expression you used, if you don't end it with a semicolon, it will return the value for you. So we have a function that returns a product. It creates this product, and it makes it a lot easier for us to create product now, because we can create product 2, for example, and then we call create product and just pass only the name. Okay, this will now be the name of the product, but now it has to be a string. Okay, so now we have a new product, which we created using this function, while capitalizing at the struct in its syntax shortcode. So these are the three types of structs in Rust. Understanding when and how to use them will make your life a lot easier as a Rust programmer.